I originally had a different video planned for this month. Funnily enough, that video was also Star Trek themed. However, it felt a little more timely to talk about this film, given its themes are just as relevant today as they were upon its initial release 29 years ago. After the disappointing reception of Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, Paramount Pictures was cautious about greenlighting another sequel. Producer Harve Bennett suggested doing a prequel with a new, cheaper cast, exploring the crew's younger days at Starfleet Academy, an idea which had been suggested as early as Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, and one which the franchise would eventually return to. After a great deal of convoluted back and forth, it was instead decided that a sixth and final film featuring the cast of Star Trek: The Original Series would be produced in time for the franchise's 25th anniversary. Thus was born Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. Before we begin, be warned this video will include spoilers. The film was directed by Nicholas Meyer, who also directed the universally well-received Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, and co-wrote The Voyage Home. Meyer worked closely with Leonard Nimoy to craft a story which would serve as an allegory for the end of the Cold War, wherein a disaster forces the Klingon Empire to pursue peace with the United Federation of Planets. Not only did this reflect then current world events, it also tied into the era of Star Trek: The Next Generation, by which time the Empire was at peace with the Federation. The film feels like the end of an era, both on and off screen.
So, this is goodbye.
Having played these characters for 25 years, the main cast were all comfortable in their roles. Knowing this was their final film together, I believe, created a sense of freedom for the actors, as they were able to leave it all on the field. William Shatner in particular gives possibly his best performance as James T. Kirk in this film. Shatner, who is often accused of overacting, is quite restrained, as Kirk reluctantly carries out his mission as Starfleet's emissary of peace.
Would you and your party care to dine this evening, aboard the Enterprise with my officers, as guests of the United Federation of Planets?
We would be delighted to accept your gracious invitation.
The cast feels like a true ensemble, with each member contributing to the plot.
Doctor, would you care to assist me in performing surgery on a torpedo?
Fascinating.
The film notably broke up the core cast by finally promoting Sulu to captain and giving him command of the USS Excelsior. George Takei slipped into this new role very naturally. Interestingly, Sulu had expressed interest in the Excelsior in The Voyage Home.
We'll get a freighter.
With all respect, Doctor, I'm counting on Excelsior.
Excelsior? Why in God's name would you want that bucket of boots?
Despite being separated from the rest of the main cast, Sulu's unwavering loyalty to his former shipmates is inspiring.
Standing by, Captain Kirk.
Sulu, you realize that by even talking to us, you're violating regulations.
I'm sorry, Captain. Your message is breaking up.
Bless you, Sulu.
The Undiscovered Country confirmed Kirk's middle name.
James Tiberius Kirk.
The name Tiberius had first been used in the Star Trek The Animated Series episode, Bem.
I am Captain James Tiberius Kirk.
The film also featured the first canonical use of Sulu's first name on screen.
Captain's Log, USS Excelsior. Hikaru Sulu commanding.
Though The Undiscovered Country was the final film to feature the entire main cast of the original series, only DeForest Kelley and Nichelle Nichols made their last official appearances. Kelly had made a cameo appearance in the series premiere of The Next Generation. Nichols objected to the scene in which Uhura struggles to speak Klingon via a physical set of translation dictionaries.
We must respond personally. A universal translator would be recognized.
She felt that as the ship's communications officer, the character would be able to speak the language. This criticism was later rectified in Star Trek Into Darkness. The Undiscovered Country also brought back several supporting characters from previous films. Fleet Admiral Cartwright and the unnamed Klingon ambassador both first appeared in the voyage home. The ambassador had even alluded to the prospect of peace between the Empire and the Federation in the earlier film.
Remember this well. There shall be no peace as long as Kirk lives.
This was also Mark Leonard's final appearance as Sarek, having played the character in episodes of the original series, the animated series, The Next Generation, and 2 previous films. Grace Lee Whitney returned once again as Janice Rand, now serving aboard the Excelsior under the command of her former shipmate. Having appeared as Federation representative St. John Talbot in The Final Frontier, David Warner returned for this film as the idealistic Klingon Chancellor, Gorkon. Michael Dorn also appeared as Colonel Worf, intended to be the grandfather of his character from The Next Generation. The Vulcan conspirator serving aboard the Enterprise was originally going to be Savik. Maya wanted to bring back Kirstie Alley, who had originated the role in The Wrath of Khan. However, Alley proved too expensive. Sadly, Robin Curtis was never even considered, despite the fact she had played Savik in both Star Trek III: The Search for Spock and The Voyage Home. Instead, the film introduced the character of Valeris.
The lieutenant was the first Vulcan to be graduated at the top of her class at the Academy.
You must be very proud.
I don't believe so, sir.
She's a Vulcan, all right.
Funnily enough, Kim Cattrall had actually auditioned for the role of Savik in The Wrath of Khan. Obviously, it would have been more impactful if the traitor had been revealed to be an established character. However, the film does an effective job establishing Spock's trust in Valeris. It's clear he feels deeply betrayed, even if the viewer doesn't. The Undiscovered Country received a lower budget than its immediate predecessor. The only other time that had happened was in the case of The Wrath of Khan. On both occasions, Maya was in the director's chair. Once again, the director used the film's limited resources very effectively. As had been the case on the previous film, several sets were borrowed from The Next Generation between production of the series' 4th and 5th seasons. For example, the Federation President's office is a redress of 10 Forward. Good luck unseeing that. Funnily enough, many of these sets had originally been built for the first 3 films, before being repurposed on The Next Generation. One of the only new sets built for this film was the bridge of the Enterprise A, actually the 3rd design seen on screen. This set also doubled as the bridge of the Excelsior. In fact, those scenes were actually shot first. Given this bridge set was noticeably smaller than the one seen in The Search for Spock, visual effects art director Bill George, a stickler for detail, actually downsized the bridge module on the filming model. Having been unavailable to work on The Final Frontier, Industrial Light and Magic returned for the sequel. The results speak for themselves. In fact, the film features some early use of CG effects. Despite some impressive-looking new model sequences, the filmmakers couldn't avoid using this shot from The Voyage Home once again. By necessity, The Undiscovered Country is less action-driven than some of its predecessors. That said, the final 3-way battle between the Enterprise, the Excelsior, and the prototype Bird of Prey is both tense and engaging. In 2004, a special edition of the film was released on DVD. This version included additional and extended scenes. Most notably, a subplot involving a Starfleet conspirator called Colonel West. This was actually Rene Auberjonois' first Star Trek role. Auberjonois is of course best known for playing Odo on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. The film has a number of light-hearted moments.
Who wanted us killed?
Since you're all going to die anyway, why not tell you? His name is...
Oh, no! Son of a...
However, The Undiscovered Country is notably darker than many of its predecessors. The scene in which Valeris is interrogated via mind meld, for example, is quite confronting. Maya originally wanted to bring back composer James Horner, who had written the scores for The Wrath of Khan and The Search for Spock. However, Horner declined. Maya then turned to Jerry Goldsmith, who also declined. Instead, the score for The Undiscovered Country was composed by franchise newcomer Cliff Idleman. Idleman's music is hauntingly memorable and reflects the film's darker tone. Despite this being a swan song, the composer didn't rely on familiar themes to evoke viewers' nostalgia, instead focusing on the story at hand. In fact, there are surprisingly few overt callbacks throughout The Undiscovered Country, though the theme of endings is at the very heart of the film.
I do not understand this representation.
It is a depiction from ancient Earth mythology. the expulsion from paradise.
Why keep it in your quarters?
It is a reminder to me that all things end.
The film also unapologetically addresses themes such as prejudice and racism.
We do believe all planets have a sovereign claim to inalienable human rights.
Inalien. If you could only hear yourselves. Human rights. Why, the very name is racist.
These subjects hit closer to home for certain members of the cast. For example, Chekhov's line,
"Guess who's coming to dinner?"
in reference to the 1967 film, was originally written for Uhura. However, Nichols refused to say it. Likewise, Brock Peters, who, let's not forget, played Tom Robinson in To Kill a Mockingbird, was understandably uncomfortable with a number of his character's lines.
The opportunity here is to bring them to their knees. Then we'll be in a far better position to dictate terms.
Despite presenting itself on the surface as a political thriller, the film is primarily about change, and people's response to that change.
People can be very frightened of change.
The film initially presents Kirk as an unequivocal racist.
They're animals, Jim. There is an historic opportunity here.
Don't believe them. Don't trust them.
They are dying.
Let them die.
Over the course of the film, he is forced to acknowledge his own prejudices and rise above them.
I was used to hating Klingons. It never even occurred to me to take Gorkin at his word.
In doing so, he is finally able to find peace with the death of his son, David.
You've restored my father's faith.
And you've restored my son's.
This mention was even more poignant as the actor, Merritt Buttrick, had actually passed away 2 years earlier. Star Trek's creator, Gene Roddenberry, who incidentally passed away 2 months before the film's release, was highly critical of the Undiscovered Country. He felt quite passionately that the blatant racism present in the film did not reflect his enlightened vision of the future. However, I believe the film actually presents a more realistic version of that future. The world Roddenberry envisioned won't simply be handed to us on a plate. We have to work hard to make it a reality. In the first episode of the prequel series, Star Trek Enterprise, Trip talks about humanity's progress since making first contact with the Vulcans 88 years earlier.
How about war? Disease, hunger. Pretty much wiped them out in less than 2 generations. I wouldn't call that small potatoes.
Interestingly, we still haven't ever seen that era portrayed on screen. Quite frankly, because it's much easier said than done. The Undiscovered Country explores what it takes to bring about that kind of change. Kirk is hardly alone in his feelings, as the other characters willingly point out.
Oh, they might as well have prosecuted me. I felt like Lieutenant Valaris.
Well, they don't arrest people for having feelings.
And it's a good thing, too. If they did, we'd all have to turn ourselves in.
The film allows its characters to be flawed without becoming unlikable. In doing so, it hopefully encourages viewers to examine their own prejudices, especially those they may not be consciously aware of. In typical fashion, Meyer injected various literary references throughout, including an amusing nod to Sherlock Holmes.
An ancestor of mine maintained that if you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
The film also includes at least 12 references to the works of William Shakespeare, many of which are delivered by the film's antagonist, General Chang, played to perfection by Christopher Plummer.
I am constant as the northern star.
I'd give real money if he'd shut up.
Even the film's subtitle, The Undiscovered Country, is itself a Shakespeare quote.
I offer a toast. The undiscovered country. The future.
The undiscovered country.
Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1.
You have not experienced Shakespeare until you have read him in the original Klingon.
In lesser hands, this could have come across as self-indulgent or pretentious. However, these references actually tie into the film's themes. The Undiscovered Country directly inspired 4 television episodes across 3 different series. About a month before the film's release, Nimoy appeared as Spock in the Next Generation 2-part storyline, Unification.
I'm looking for Ambassador Spock. Indeed. You have found him, Captain Picard.
These episodes thematically serve as a companion piece to The Undiscovered Country, with Spock directly referencing the events of the film.
Perhaps you're aware of the small role I played in the overture to peace with the Klingons.
History is aware of the role you played, Ambassador.
Not entirely. It was I who committed Captain Kirk to that peace mission, and I who had to bear the responsibility for the consequences to him and to his crew.
5 years later, as part of Star Trek's 30th anniversary celebrations, Star Trek Voyager aired the episode Flashback, which largely took place aboard the Excelsior during the events of this film.
Outstanding. I may have to give you a promotion.
That was not my motivation, Captain. I am not attempting to curry favor with you in any way.
Mr. Tuvok, if you're going to remain on my ship, you're going to have to learn how to appreciate a joke. And don't tell me Vulcans don't have a sense of humor, because I know better.
Enterprise later revisited Ruapente 141 years earlier, when Captain Archer was sentenced to the penal colony in the episode Judgment. The final scene is pitched perfectly.
Course heading, Captain.
Second star to the right. And straight on till morning.
The film was originally going to end with Kirk handing the Enterprise over to Captain Picard, until someone pointed out the 71-year gap in the timeline. However, Kirk's final captain's log symbolically passes the torch to the next generation, adopting the gender-neutral "where no one has gone before."
They will continue the voyages we have begun, and journey to all the undiscovered countries, boldly going where no man, where no one has gone before.
Much like Avengers Endgame, the Undiscovered Country serves as a satisfying conclusion to a specific era of a long-running franchise. It is also my favourite of the first 6 Star Trek films. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you liked this video, why not give it a thumbs up? Maybe share it with a friend, or an enemy. Either way, be sure you subscribe and turn on notifications to see more content here on Channel 73.